with Haryanto Daman. I'm Olivia Quay. Subscribe to the Straits Times channel so you never miss a single episode.
Here's the latest update on the COVID-19 cases in Singapore. The Health Ministry confirmed 218 new COVID-19 cases today. There is one case in the community who is a work pass holder.
The vast majority of the remaining cases are foreign workers living in dormitories, and Singapore's total count now stands at 42,313. More details will be released later.
Shopping malls came to life once again over the weekend as businesses opened their doors to usher in phase 2 of Singapore's reopening. After about 2 months of staying in, Singaporeans were finally able to shop or dine in at their favorite restaurants with their family and friends, although in groups of not more than 5.
Malls and businesses also had in place crowd and queue management measures. So how was business over the first weekend of phase 2? And were shoppers out in full force to make up for lost time when shops were closed?
We're joined by Executive Director of Singapore Retailers Association, Rose Tong, to discuss this further. Rose, how was the crowd over the weekend? What sort of feedback have you got from your members about how they did over the 3 days?
Well, retailers were very happy and anxious to reopen, and they were very happy to see retail alive again after 2.5 months of closure, people shopping and people dining. However, it wasn't quite revenge shopping at to the level that we expect, that the retailers had expected. I think this is largely due to the muted promotions in compliance with government regulations. So shopper traffic was understandably low. And I think it's also largely due to all the crowd management measures, and safe management measures, which are of course critical to ensure that, there isn't a resurgence of the virus.
Right. Well, on that note, go ahead.
Yeah, because of the low traffic, it also resulted in less opportunities for sales conversion. So sales wasn't, at that level. In fact, sales was probably between 30 to 70% lower year on year, as reported by the retailers. Even online sales dropped the moment, the reopening date was announced. So I guess the retailers will have to work much harder in the next few weeks.
Right. Well, Rose, earlier you mentioned safe management measures. Did the retailers have any difficulty enforcing them or even those crowd management control?
No, I think our retailers were well briefed. The guidelines were very, very clear. We also had a webinar, advising some of the retailers, some of the measures in place, and they had a good opportunity to interact and ask questions with the ESG team. So I don't think our retailers will have any issue implementing this. And yep, we would certainly never want to flout any of the rules because we don't want to close again.
Now, Rose, on that note, over the weekend, a restaurant at Holland Village was ordered to shut, and the other restaurants in the area were also not allowed to have seating space outside of their premises. This was due to large crowds gathered at the area, disregarding safe distancing measures. Do retailers face similar concerns of being shut as well?
Well, I really don't think so, or at least we also hope not, because our retailers have been very compliant, very observant, and adhere to the rules, strictly. Even though smaller stores are not required to, implement safe entry, they have also been doing that to ensure that, contact tracing would actually be helpful if required. I guess at the end of the day, the ownership of social distancing is, a tripartite relationship between the customer, the retailer, and of course the mall owner. So we are in this together, and no one wants for Singapore to go into another closure, so retailers are working hard at it. And, and we have been having retailers asking us for clarifications all the time. And can they do this? Can they do that? Etc. Which actually shows that they are very, very anxious and to make sure that they do it right.
Right. Well, Rosa, you mentioned that sales were down, but was there any trend or pattern observed among the shoppers in terms of the things that they bought? Did some businesses do better than others?
Yep. the health, fitness, wellness, sports, athleisure, IT, and electronics actually did far better. I guess it's also, the consumer behavior in search of, fitness, health, and keeping themselves generally safe. For fashion accessories, this didn't do as well, and I reckon that because now that the stores they had been able to shop online, and they may have already bought their fair share, and so when they actually go down right now, expecting sales, but then maybe not so much, and that could have actually helped their spending a bit. But I guess at this point in time, it's still early days yet. Retailers will need to be creative to look at how they can actually, pivot their business such that they can actually advertise better on social media, leveraging on social media, video, live streaming, etc., to put the brands across and to actually showcase their brands and offerings to, get the shoppers out there to their stores.
Right. Rose, let's talk a bit about online sales because you touched on that previously as well. Many retailers, they've turned to set up online shops during the shutdown. Now that the stores are reopened, can retailer expect a drop in online sales? And how can they better manage both sides of their businesses? Do you have any figures on that front?
Yeah, actually, the day that the announcement was made that phase 2 retail will open on the 19th, some retailers have reported a nosedive in online retail from as high as between 30 to even 80%. I guess this is also because it is within the culture of Singaporeans to want to go down to the malls to touch and feel in the products. And well, essentially Singapore is really quite small. We've got a great transport infrastructure. We've got satellite towns, suburban shopping right almost at your doorstep. So I think consumers generally may not see the need to do online shopping, but online shopping or online retail would be something that we would encourage all retailers to go on board still as an alternative revenue stream, but also more for cross-border e-commerce so that they can get their products out of Singapore to the different countries out down there, whilst we cannot have tourists in Singapore.
Well, thank you so much, Rose, for taking time to speak with us and sharing your insights as well. We were speaking to Executive Director of Singapore Retailers Association, Rose Tong, on the first weekend of Phase 2 when retailers were allowed to resume business.
In local news, Singapore's plans to expand its rail network by more than 50% will be delayed due to COVID-19. Instead of reaching their target 360 kilometers by 2030, the expansion will now be by early 2030s. That's according to Transport Minister Koh Boon Wan. He added that the delay is because of availability of construction workers during this pandemic. Rail lines that were due to be completed in the next decade include the remaining phases of the Thomson East Coast Line, Jurong Region Line and the first part of the Cross Island Line. The Circle Line, Downtown Line and North East Line were also due to get additional stations. Stage 2 of the Thomson East Coast Line was set to be completed later this year.
Jobs in the info communications space are available for Singaporeans over the next 3 years as Singapore is facing a huge shortage of professionals in the sector. In an interview with the Straits Times, the Minister in charge of the Smart Nation Initiative, Vivian Balakrishnan, said Singaporeans can secure these well-paying jobs if they are prepared to train and reskill. He added that the Infocom space currently employs around 200,000 professionals in Singapore and will require another 60,000 over the next 3 years. But the education system is producing only 2,800 Infocom graduates each year. We'll have more of this interview later in the show.
A man is suing NParks over his wife's death after a tambusu tree fell and hit her in February 2017. Mr. Jerome Siresh is seeking damages for the loss and bereavement suffered by his family as his wife was a means of support for him and their 4-year-old twin children. He has accused the National Parks Board of negligence, which led to the collapse of the 270-year-old tree. Among other things, he alleges NParks failed to have a proper and adequate adequate system to assess and inspect the tree. In its defense, NParks countered that it had exercised reasonable care and skill in the maintenance of the tree as is expected of its position. It added that the inspection and maintenance regime was guided by best management practices by the International Society of Arboriculture.
Last week, Minister in charge of the Smart Nation initiative, Vivian Balakrishnan, sat down with the Straits Times and highlighted some industries which could be expected to grow in the future after COVID-19. Dr. Balakrishnan said that building new skills and staying ahead of global developments in technology are crucial to Singapore's economic recovery.
He also said that the code used in the upcoming TraceTogether token has been open sourced for public access. This would help to confirm that the device contains no tracking abilities. Here are the highlights from his interview with our tech editor, Irene Tham.
If you think about where the jobs of the future will be, they are in high tech, high touch, and high art. And let me specify. I think high tech we all already understand. If you're a programmer, if you're a UX designer, you program robots, or better still, you create robots, you understand machine vision, you have no shortage of jobs. In fact, people are looking for you. But the other area is high touch. I mean, healthcare, education, social services, where you actually need the touch, the interaction from another human being. Those jobs, in fact, will continue to grow. So if you look at healthcare, you will definitely see an increase. Regardless of this crisis, even in the aftermath of it, there will be a continued demand for high touch jobs. The other area which I believe has opportunity is what I call high art. If you can paint, write, direct, those are specialized skills which machines cannot do and cannot do yet. And that's the other source of opportunity. So when we look at jobs, we have to understand both the short-term impact and then the medium to long-term trends. People who have not been in the IT industry but are willing to go back, learn, relearn, upskill, and that's why we're also trying to persuade thousands of people willing to learn to come into this sector. So you see, the point I'm trying to make is the importance of upskilling, of skills future, of providing pathways for people to move from current jobs to new jobs, but equipped with new skills. So don't just look at what is disappearing or in danger, but look at the opportunities. So we need the training institutions to step up. We need employers to change mindsets. We need people willing to come out of our comfort zones, learn new things, take on new jobs. And we need to make sure that these jobs go with good wages. And we should not have to apologize that we are tilting the playing field in favor of our own citizens. We may need foreigners to supplement us or to help us to expand the overall pie. But the core of it and the bulk of the opportunities must come to our own people.
The pandemic has kind of put a dampener on demand for some of these jobs at the moment. When do you see demand soaring again and the hiatus
Well, like I said, it will depend on which kinds. Retail, F&B, that kind of areas which I think will take longer to recover. And the answer as to when it will recover is that it depends on when we will be rid of COVID-19. It has become endemic, meaning it is now embedded in the world. Even if you are now, at this point in time, free of it, there will always be the risk of second, third, and fourth waves. The only thing that will change will be a discovery of a vaccine that is effective and effective for the long term. So the next few months, in fact, the next year or two, are likely to be quite volatile, difficult years. But what I'm trying to do is to remind people that for the short-term pain, government will help. We will do our best. What happens if there is really a technological bifurcation? And I would say the first answer is we have to look at ourselves. Do we have enough engineers? Are we doing sufficient research and development to contribute to the evolution of standards in the world, industrial and technical standards? Next, do we remain open to talent, and are we connected to all the other countries in the world? So I think there is still a lot that we can do. You cannot insulate ourselves completely from the problems with the superpowers, but we can make ourselves more resilient. So my specific recommendations are, first, we will continue to invest in infrastructure, whether it is broadband, 4G, 5G, and beyond. We make a commitment that we will always stay at or near the bleeding edge of technology. First thing. Second, invest in people. Our universities, our technical institutions, our adult education options, our skills future must continue to provide opportunity after opportunity for people to learn, relearn, stay current, stay ahead of the game.
I mean, you have to announce the issuing of a TraceTogether token, a wearable device, so that it can be more inclusive.
Yes.
If voluntary, do you think people will use the device?
The reason why I have not pushed that this be compulsory is I believe this is another opportunity to have a conversation, an explanation, and to get voluntary cooperation, and that people do it because they understand it and not because they have to.
Is the government exploring ways to incentivize the use of the TraceTogether app through maybe gamification or other incentives?
Yes. Well, you will notice that we open sourced it. If there are problems or bugs that need to be fixed, the community out there will inform GovTech and we will make the changes. Third, it proves there's no backdoor. What you see is what you get. If we tell you we're not tracking your location, you can see that we're not tracking your location. Fourth, as you said, if someone can come to us now and say, hey, your program is so elegant and so simple. In fact, I can make it work on something more attractive, more interesting, or something which people are more likely to use. I will happily say, please, take it, create something, submit it to us, let's look at it, and if it meets the security and the privacy conditions that we have to impose, it can become part of the ecosystem.
Under what circumstance would we mandate the use of Bluetooth tracing?
I'm very reluctant to go there for the reasons I explained. And you see, it's like today, we have 2 million voluntarily doing it as an act of collective responsibility. We will keep pushing.
Is there any reason to be wary of big tech firms? I mean, I'm referring to the Apple Google system. And also the history of tracking.
Well, frankly, they track far more than governments. And they track for commercial reasons. Right? But having said that, again, my approach to them is to promote open source. After all, we are all facing a common threat. And it's not a matter of whose technology is superior or inferior. Let's open source, let's collaborate, and let's try to make things better and safer. So I do not view the internet majors as rivals or adversaries. I very much want them to be partners. And I think, to be fair, I think they are moving in that direction. But let's keep the conversations going and keep it open.
Those were the highlights of our interview with Minister in charge of the Smart Nation Initiative, Vivian Balakrishnan. Do visit the Straits Times YouTube channel for the full interview.
For the top headlines around the world, let's go to Dylan Ang.
Thanks, guys. China officials said Beijing is capable of screening almost 1 million people a day for the coronavirus, as testing continues across the city to try to contain the spread of a fresh outbreak. Although initially focused on people who worked or shopped at Xinfandi Market, testing has been expanded to include residents in many areas of the city. The outbreak, the first in Beijing in months, has surpassed the previous peak numbers seen in the city in early February. Saudi Arabia has ended its nationwide coronavirus curfew and lifted restrictions on businesses, despite a spike in infections. State media reported that prayers were also allowed to resume in mosques in the holy city of Mecca, just weeks before the annual Hajj pilgrimage is due to start. The nation has the highest reported number of infections in the Gulf and has seen a spike in cases after it began to face easing of stringent measures in late May. On Sunday, the total number of infections rose to 157,612, while the death toll climbed to 1,267. In Germany, police reinforcements were sent to maintain a coronavirus quarantine on a tower block after violence on Saturday. Officials said 200 of the 700 people placed in quarantine clashed with police, attacking with fireworks, bottles and metal bars. The quarantine was introduced on Thursday after 2 residents tested positive. By Friday, 120 people there were already found to be infected. That's all for our global updates. Back to you guys.
Thanks, Dylan. Now it was a weekend of walkabouts for the People's Action Party and the opposition. Maybe you saw several potential candidates in your neighborhoods. It's yet another sign that the next general election will be called soon.
Labour Chief Ng Chee Meng, tipped to helm the PAP team in the new Sengkang GRC, met residents in the Compassvale area. Li Lian, who's likely to lead the Workers' Party team in Sengkang, said on Facebook that volunteers were distributing flyers since Friday.
In Nee Soon GRC, Home Affairs and Law Minister K. Shanmugam visited 2 neighbourhoods with a couple of potential candidates. Progress Singapore Party members, including Secretary General Tan Cheng Bock, also turned up in Chongpang.
Over in Marine Parade GRC, Emeritus Senior Minister Goh Chok Tong walked from the PAP branch to Marine Parade Central Market, where he interacted with stallholders. During his walkabout in Bukit Batok SMC on Saturday, Singapore Democratic Party Chief Chee Soon Juan told residents that he'll return to contest the ward.
Meanwhile, WP non-constituency MP Dennis Tan has been tipped to run in Hougang, with sources saying he's set to take over 2-term WP MP Peng Eng Huat.
The Singapore People's Party formally unveiled its 4 candidates for Bishan Toa Payoh GRC on Saturday morning, which will be led by Party Chief Steve Chia.
And finally, PAP MPs announced yesterday on social media their 5-year upgrading plans for estates in Tanjong Pagar GRC and Holland Bukit Timah GRC. The master plans include senior-friendly amenities, sheltered linkways, drop-off porches, and for Tanjong Pagar residents, more public transport options. Let's bring in Jeremy Au Yong, who's one of the editors of the Straits Times, leading the general election coverage. So, Jeremy, plenty of activity over the weekend with several parties on their first walkabouts. What stood out for you?
Hi, Ali. Well, I would say 2 things stood out for me. The first is, I guess on walkabouts is the time where you get to see a little bit, you get some clues about who is standing where and which parties are contesting which wards. And we got to see that this time, especially from the SDP. I thought the SDP really, in its series of walkabouts, and it did more walkabouts this weekend than nearly any other party, really put its cards out there on the table to show who is standing where. I mean, in elections past, opposition sometimes can be quite coy about revealing quite early on where they are contesting or which candidates they're going to field. That was not the case for SDP, especially this past weekend. the party's chief, Dr. Chee Soon Juan, arrived in Bukit Batok with an entourage. Everybody was wearing a t-shirt that said Chee Soon Juan for Bukit Batok. So it was very clear from the get-go he was going to stand there. And they went to do walkabouts in 4 of the 5 constituencies they contested in 2015. And they brought with them a lot of familiar faces. So it made it quite clear who was standing where. So I think in this first week of walkabout, first weekend of walkabouts actually, we got quite a decent picture of the race that's to come. The second thing that stood out for me really is safe distancing, because this is, I've been covering general elections for some time, and this was really some walkabouts unlike I've ever seen before. So much of a walkabout is letting the voter get to see your face. Everybody was wearing masks, so that became not really that much of a factor. You couldn't even really recognize people that much. Also, there was no handshaking. The other big part of a walkabout, people always talk about walkabouts as pressing the flesh. There was none of that. People were waving. The candidates were fist bumping. Sometimes they bumped elbows. So all that was quite different. I would say those were the 2 things that stood out for me.
Right. Jeremy, on that note of, safe distancing as well, even for the reporters and for the members of the media, it was also difficult for them carrying out the work. Now, we reported that 6 PSP members were booked for breaching safe distancing rules while on a walkabout at Block 358, Bukit Batok Street 31. Any comments on that, Jeremy?
Yeah, well, the NEA has since clarified that a volunteer with them had taken down the details of these 6 PSP members, and the Straits Times reporter who was covering them also had the details taken. But as of yet, nobody has been fined. I think they're looking into it. But I think my takeaway from that really is that this is, as I said earlier, this is a new experience for everyone. It's new to the candidates, it's new to reporters, it's new even to the volunteers and the safe distancing ambassadors. It's not always clear where the line is. And I mean, a walkabout is very much a very social activity. It's about getting to meet people. So I think I see as teething problems that I think everybody will get more used to as the process moves along. This is really, to me, the first instance of this safe distancing walkabout that we had to go through.
Well, another factor that this upcoming general election will see is the increased use of the digital medium. So how have the parties fared in using online platforms and reaching out to voters? And what do you think candidates and parties have to do now to ensure they can attract voters to their e-rallies?
Yeah, so I mean, it's uneven between the parties. Some parties are a little bit ahead of the others. There are 2 aspects to it. I guess the first part is the easier part, which is the tech aspect, working out how to do your live streams or your Zoom conferences or what have you. I think a lot of the parties have been practicing with that, and I think they're really starting to get the hang of it. With some parties that had some hiccups here and there. We've seen the PAP, WP, PSP, SDP all do Zoom conferences and Facebook live streams throughout the circuit breaker period. And we know parties like the SPP and SDA have built their own studios for broadcasts that they want to do, online broadcasts they want to do during the campaign. And so tech-wise, I think that's okay. And even those without equipment, the elections department has said they have set up a venue for people without the required equipment to come and book, and they can use that to do their broadcast. So the tech side, I think most parties will get there. The second part of it, and I think the much harder part, is how do you get people to watch it? I think that's a struggle for everyone. Political content, especially in a video, is not going to be that compelling most of the time. So it's one thing about how to advertise, get the word out so people know that it exists, and then it's something quite different to get them to click on it, tune in, and then to stay tuned while you are talking about it. that's quite hard. We've seen some parties experiment with little fun videos, little memes, some in a TikTok format. I think we'll see more of that coming, but it's just everybody trying out different things. I don't think anybody has really cracked this puzzle yet.
All right. Now, Jeremy, let's talk a bit more about the opposition. The opposition is set to head into the next GE without its traditional powwow, as it were. But SDP said there could be an online meeting. How would you describe the level of collaboration among the opposition parties? Do you expect several three-cornered fights, perhaps?
Yeah, I'm not sure why they have decided not to hold this powwow that they have had really every election that I can remember since dating back to the 90s. I think maybe they skipped one, but it's a little unusual that they chose not to do it this time. We've spoken to experts about this powwow, and they've pointed out that it does serve several key functions. So this powwow, you bring all the opposition members together in one room, you write down all the lists of constituencies on the board, and then they say, okay, I'm standing here, I'm standing there, and then they bargain. Maybe you stand here, and I make way for you here, you make way for me there. There's some bargaining process that goes through in the end to try and avoid three-cornered fights. So they get to know each other and they sort out the constituencies. As a group, not as what they're trying to do now is reach out directly to different parties to negotiate. So as the experts point out, some things are lost when you do it that way. Firstly, is you don't get a third party that can help break some sort of impasse. If both of us want to stand here and I have nothing else to give you, there is no third party who is listening that say, okay, maybe I can give you something else so that you stand down from there. That just doesn't exist when it's a direct one-on-one negotiation. And the other thing is a big meeting can sometimes level the playing field a little bit between a bigger party and a smaller party. In a direct negotiation between a big party and a small party, the small party has very little leverage. And especially if you are a new party, a lot of the negotiations are based on having a particular party or candidate having worked the ground in a particular constituency, and therefore that gives him more claim to run in a certain place. If you are a new party, that also doesn't happen. So all those things complicate the opposition unity this time around, and I won't be surprised if we see more three-cornered fights.
Well, let's focus on the biggest opposition party, the Workers' Party, of course. According to the WP chief Pritam Singh, Mr. Lau Tiak Yang is recovering from his injuries sustained in a fall in April. If Mr. Lau doesn't run in the next GE, Jeremy, how much of a blow would it be for WP?
Wow. Okay, so let's just be clear that we do not know if Mr. Lau is going to run or not. It's entirely possible that he will, but Mr. Lau has been really the cornerstone of the WP for some time. He is their most recognizable face and has been for the longest time their biggest personality. And you can tell the kind of presence he had or influence he had, that when he did suffer that fall, really a lot of people, even from the PAP, from across the different opposition parties, were wishing him well. So when you lose an icon like that, really any party would feel the loss, and I'm sure WP would. At the same time, over the past few years, Mr. Lau has been planning his succession, has been planning how to transition away so that leadership is passed on. So since the last election, he has stepped down as Secretary General of the Workers' Party and handed the reins over to Mr. Pritam Singh. And you can see Mr. Pritam Singh since then really starting to step forward and be more the face of the WP. So they were, even before his fall, Mr. Lau was preparing for a life, preparing his party for life after he steps down. So I think that would help temper a little bit the effect of Mr. Lau. If he chooses not to run, I think that will help temper that effect a little bit.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Jeremy. We've been speaking to foreign editor for the Straits Times, Jeremy Au Yong, who's part of the GE coverage team here at the Straits Times.
It's back to Dylan for what's also making the headlines.
North Korea says it has readied thousands of balloons and millions of leaflets in preparation for retaliatory punishment against South Korea. The details came a day after the North said it was preparing to begin an anti-South leaflet campaign, following a series of condemnations of Seoul because of anti-North leaflets floated over the border. Defectors to the South typically send back anti-North leaflets by attaching them to balloons or place them in bottles. They usually criticize Kim Jong-un's nuclear ambitions and highlight human rights abuses. US-based motor racing organization NASCAR says it is investigating after a noose was found in the garage stall of African-American driver Bubba Wallace. Wallace is NASCAR's only full-time black driver and had previously successfully campaigned to get the Confederate flag banned from races. The flag, a symbol of slavery and racism, had been a common sight at NASCAR circuits. In a statement, NASCAR condemned the heinous act, saying that it will launch an immediate investigation. Posting on Twitter, Wallace said he is incredibly saddened before stating that he will not give in or back down and will continue to stand for what he believes in. TikTok users in the US believe they have managed to successfully sabotage last weekend's Trump rally in Oklahoma by inflating attendance expectations. Mr. Trump's campaign rally in Tulsa was the first in 3 months and hosted just a fraction of the expected supporters. Anti-Trump proponents had registered with fake names or burner email accounts. Prior to the event, Trump's campaign manager had said there had been more than 1 million requests to attend. TV footage, however, showed many empty seats at the 19,000-seat arena. And that's what's also in the news. I'm Dylan Au.
Those are our top stories for today. For more news and videos, visit straitstimes.com and subscribe to our YouTube channel by hitting the red button below.
Once again, I'm Haryanto Diman with Olivia Quay. Join us tomorrow for more stories on The Big Story.